Hey, how's it going? Myles here at Tactical Hyve, and I'm coming at you from Oklahoma with one of the owners from CCW Safe, Kyle, and we're going to talk about a very important topic, and that is sharing 3 things that your average gun owner thinks is, it's okay, but can potentially land them in some legal trouble. So if you're interested, stay tuned. Kyle's going to shed some light on the topic. All right, welcome back. So as I mentioned, I'm with a special guest, Kyle, who's one of the owners of CCW Safe. He was prior law enforcement, as well as he owns a firm that deals with deadly force encounters. So he's here to share some really important insight with you so that if you run into any issues, you're more responsible, you know what to expect. So Kyle, really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely, thank you for having me, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think this is gonna be very valuable. Now, we talked a little bit about this, and so Kyle is no stranger. He's not just giving opinions here. He was in law enforcement, he deals with these legal matters all the time, and he is part owner of CCW Safe, so he knows what he's talking about. So Kyle, without further ado, let's go down the list here of 1, 2, 3. What's one thing that gun owners don't really get?
That's a great question, and I think we'd probably start with what is the #1 request for our services that we get. In other words, what's the underlying set of facts that occurred to one of our members where they have to engage our services to provide their defense, and it's brandishing. So, brandishing is simply a matter of showing somebody your weapon. Now, when you show it to somebody who's unarmed, or you show it to the person when they're witnesses, you're in most jurisdictions you are committing what's called an assault and battery. So you think of assault and battery as the battery, the actual harming of somebody, but in an assault case it's just the fear of the touching. So in the legal world, if you brandish your weapon and show your weapon to somebody to try to get them to back down or get away from you or whatever, and they're not armed, you are subjecting yourself to a charge of brandishing, which is an assault, because you're threatening them with the presence of your gun, and so you don't have the actual battery, you haven't shot them, but you have the assault, and so that results in the most common request for services and criminal charge filed against our members. And
this is a great point, because if you guys recall, a few months ago, I had a sit-down interview with Rob Hyve, who is one of their use of force experts, and we were talking about brandishing. And we know it's not necessarily clear-cut in the sense that there's some people who have been in experiences where they brandish and it actually stopped everything, but maybe they were fortunate. It sounds like they were fortunate that someone never came after them, and it potentially could be that. But beyond that, the one thing that really stood out is, how do you know if the other person was even, is going to cause you any deadly harm? So in those situations, I think it's more clear-cut, where you brandish, the other person may not have any intention to, give you, any intention to harm you, or I guess, not deadly force, and then that puts you in a bad situation. Yeah,
and the whole point about brandishing too is the way prosecutors look at this. So I live in Oklahoma, and it's a very conservative state, and I have a lot of faith and trust in our district attorneys that they're not the type of people who are going to just want to run around making a name for themselves by charging somebody with a crime, an average person. But not everybody lives in a jurisdiction where they can trust their elected officials are going to do the right thing when it comes to displaying of a weapon to direct someone away from you. So what it ultimately boils down to is, none of us should be in a situation where we put our freedom and our liberty and our ability to provide for our families in the hands of somebody else. And what we do, what we don't understand is, most prosecutors have a belief that if you display your weapon, then you better have had a reason to use your weapon. So in other words, that weapon doesn't come out until you have a legal, justifiable use of deadly force. And that's the way prosecutors treat that.
Yeah, and so that's an important point too, because we're talking about the legal, kind of the legal perspective here, and I already alluded to, we've heard, even some people have commented on our previous video that they show they're going to de-escalate the situation. Yeah, that's great. But legally, if something happens, then you're put in a bad spot. So hopefully that first point is insightful for some of you who may have thought that brandishing is always a de-escalation tool. It could actually land you in some trouble.
And it's actually considered an escalation of aggression, not a de-escalation of it.
Yeah. And that's something that we've talked about on this channel quite a lot. And so I'm happy to have Kyle also reinforce that. So how about the second point, Kyle? What do you think gun owners have a misconception about? Another thing.
Well, I think it dovetails with the first one, with with brandishing and turning over all of your liberties to a prosecutor to make a decision. And that is, the things that we wear and carry define us. So if you're going to be in a use of force situation, you're most likely going to have law enforcement contact. You're going to go to the police station. You're going to be interviewed at a minimum. And so one of the things they do is they're going to photograph everything on you. And I'm a big fan of like EDC dumps, right? Pocket dumps and things of that nature. And what I see on there, oftentimes I'm like, that's cool. I'm going to have to look that up and buy it. But a lot of times I look at it, Myles, and I think, oh my God, I can't believe you have this as part of your EDC. Perhaps it's, on the back of the gun has a don't tread on me, or it has a Punisher logo, or the ammunition box next to the gun is, zombie killer or something like that, or their holster shows, like something super aggressive looking. And one of the things that we say is the things that we wear and carry define us, is because those are pieces of evidence, circumstantial though it may be, of intent. And what you want to do is the things that you're carrying and wearing, if you happen to be in a use of force situation, demonstrate that you did not want to be involved in a situation. You were not looking for one. And if you're somebody who comes from the super aggressive style of wearing your clothing, or the things that you're carrying, multiple knives and things like that, or certain knives that don't really, they're more like prison shanks than they are an actual pocket knife that you open. All of us open mail with our knives. We don't actually defend ourselves. And so in this context, it's really important to realize that someone's going to look at those, they're going to take photographs of all of those, and they're going to show them to a jury, many of whom are not gun people. And so what you need to be aware of is those things will define you to the audience that is ultimately going to judge your criminal case. And that's going to be 12 people who you like to think of them as your peers, and they are not. They're not going to be 12 gun owners who are very favorable towards the Second Amendment. They're going to be 12, just run-of-the-mill people, and you need to demonstrate reasonableness, and the type of ammunition you carry should be the same as what you carry on the police force. If you're doing hand loads and all this kind of stuff and zombie killer ammunition, you're making yourself look like the thing they are afraid of. Yeah. And so we got to be very careful and realize that all of those things are taken in context of the situation that we found ourselves in, and can really be the decisive factor of whether a prosecutor files the case at all. And then if he or she file it, then you've got a judge and a jury who are going to make the determinations of whether it was a justifiable use of force in the context of you looking like you were super aggressive and you were seeking this out.
Really good points. And I'm sure some of the viewers on your mind, you're probably thinking about, okay, so to what extent? So let me ask you, Kyle, is it okay for me to wear a Tactical Hyve shirt?
Absolutely. And I think there's been obviously a lot of thought that's gone into your logo and your marketing products, and those are completely fine. And that just shows to me, this is somebody who's into training, right? And it makes sense. You're in the sun a lot because you're out on a range. You're wearing things that aren't like screaming, Navy SEAL wannabe. You're wearing things that are justifiable for the activity that you're doing. And so what we're talking about are things that demonstrate aggression. T-shirts that say "kill them all, let God sort them out." Really aggressive imagery and things like that are what is going to be concerning to a DA and ultimately to a jury. Feel free to wear your Brownell shirt. Feel free to wear your any shirt that demonstrates that you're someone who's a fan of shooting or the outdoors. That's fine. Just be aware of the message it's sending to somebody who may not be into those same things.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Kyle. And there's a third point that Kyle and I were talking about yesterday that I think is very insightful. And what is that for our viewers?
Well, Myles, I think it's important that people recognize that one of our real life problems that we have for our members is that sometimes leaving a safe environment to engage with somebody who's being an aggressor. And part of that is check your ego. If you're going to have the responsibility of carrying a gun, you should check your ego at home. You should, disengage, de-escalate the situation. But leaving a safe environment would be an example. We've had cases like this. A parking lot dispute. There's somebody out there who's wanting to be a jerk, and they're going to think that you tried to cut them off in the parking space, and they're going to come up to you and engage, and I'm not like some MMA badass like you are, Myles. I'm going to be like, I don't want any contact. But there are people who, because they're carrying a gun, feels like I don't have to put up with this type of behavior anymore. This is my parking space, and their ego gets involved, and they wind up getting themselves in trouble. And after an incident, sometimes a terrible incident, they're like, oh my God, I wish I would have just gone home. I wish I would have backed out. I wish I would have found another parking space. I wish I would have driven off. And what happens in these cases where they'll roll the window down to engage and yell at the person. They'll get out of their car and buck up like they're not going to have to put up with this anymore. And in our first topic about brandishing, which is our number one claim for membership services that we see, they'll display a weapon. And so that's at the point where
that already escalates.
You have now escalated the situation, and what they're going to take is the situation in its entirety. And if you leave a safe environment to engage with somebody who's being aggressive, not only are you committing a legally questionable act that's going to prevent you from asserting certain self-defenses, which are affirmative defenses, but you're also taking a great risk.
Yeah.
You just don't know who this other person is, and I can tell you, they are not worth it. The feeling that you have of I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore should absolutely not be within you when you're carrying a gun. And it winds up pushing people to make bad decisions that have terrible consequences for them and their families.
So it sounds like ego and emotions really can take over.
Absolutely.
And so with the three points that you shared for our viewers, you know those three are very common among CCW Safe customers. What can they do, or our viewers, what can they do to overcome those? Like now knowledge, they have the knowledge, but what are some things they can put in place to manage those emotions and ego and maybe even proper decision making? Well,
first of all, I think you're doing it right now. You're providing training. And so, zealously go through content like Tactical Hyve that is legitimate. It's being created by people who are questioning how to do things and how to be more of a responsible citizen with the incredible responsibility of carrying a gun. We have on ccwsafe.com, we have a lot of content on de-escalation. And so be a consumer of reasonable content. Don't just go online and Google somebody who's just blowing up, pans with guns. Do something that is enriching your life and enriching your ability to make a good decision, because people do not rise to the occasion. They default to their lowest level of preparation. And your background in martial arts and in shooting, you know that. I can't compete with you at those things, so I need to be the best version of myself. And the only way I can prepare myself physically and through skills is by engaging, actively seeking training and consuming it and realizing that I have that responsibility if I'm going to carry a gun. And you wind up reducing your risk, so you become your own risk manager at that point.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it, Kyle. And I liked how Kyle ended, like this, kind of summarized it. It all comes down to training. And you guys, if you've been watching us for a while, that's what we're all about, training and educating you guys on proper decisions, marksmanship. And now we want to really highlight different legal issues that you might run into. So I really appreciate the time, Kyle. That was great. And if you guys have any questions about what Kyle just talked about, or anything in the future, we'll bring Kyle in or anyone else from CCW Safe to address, let us know in the comments section below. And as always, if you guys like the video, please give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. See you guys next time.